Welcome to our podcast and strap in for Movie Monday. Hi, I'm Minky Madison.
And I'm Jack Green.
Today on Movie Monday, we discuss Deadtime Stories, the 2009 unrated horror anthology of 3 short films. So, I personally give this anthology a rating of 4 kernels. Yes, that high.
Wow.
Because because for me, it falls under the so bad it's good category and is one of the best B horror compilations I've seen. It had me laughing the whole time, pretty hard. And the stories kept me entertained as well. So for those who enjoy that type of thing, I think it would be a 4. But if you're looking for a serious and well done horror anthology, then definitely skip it. Otherwise, I think you're in for a treat. At least I was. What kernels did you give it?
I gave it 2 kernels, and
Oh,
I would say it was, the opposite experience of what you had. Um,
aw, sadness.
so I did not enjoy it. I didn't feel like it was a good compilation, and that's not to say there's nothing I liked about any of it, because I will go into, obviously, my praise. But
Mhm.
overall, like, it was not a good experience.
Okay, so stop and watch the movie first now, or strap in for major spoilers.
So the
Okay.
first title was Valley of the Shadow. That was the first story that we're thrust into. But before that, I did like the introduction by George A. Romero on the
Yeah.
TVs.
Hmm.
He switches between the TVs and he gives different quotes and it's just playful. So I just like that whole introduction. And he's well known for horror, like really him and Tom Savini, and they're the pioneers basically of horror, and everything that we have today is kind of built off of what they did. But anyway, that's I digress. Um,
I agree with that.
so I'll go into. So you felt the same way about that?
Yeah. Yeah, in my notes here I put I loved the old man George Romero, which I have to admit I did not know who that was before seeing this. But
Mm,
I thought he did really good, and then I found out that he actually wrote Night of the Living Dead, which
yep.
is one of my favorites. And also he wrote Crazies, or The Crazies rather. I didn't like the new one because we had watched that fairly recently. Um,
Oh wow.
but that was actually written by different writers. The new one was. It was obviously based off the original, but he wrote the original 1973 version. So I would actually like to see that at some point because he wrote, Night of the Living Dead. So I would like to see what he actually intended it to be. And I liked him reading the bad poems in this, and the 50 stacked staticky TV screens was funny.
Yeah, that was cool. To my praise for Valley of the Shadow, we're not really um we're not really any praise there, just that it was kind of funny. I mean, I do agree with you on that one, but I felt like the acting was bad. The special effects seemed like what George A. Romero did many years ago. For instance, Alan having the arrow through his cheek.
That was amazing. It's
He's
funny that we have such vastly different views on it.
Yeah, the scream. Alan was screaming when this arrow was basically shot through his face, right through his cheek, and out the other side. And at first, the screaming's okay, but the longer it goes on, the more comical it becomes. Like the
What?
where.
So let me ask you this. So it seems like you took this movie very seriously because that's how they intended it, right?
Mhm.
I took this as it was so bad it was hilarious. Like there's certain movies that are just so terrible that they're the funniest thing you've ever seen, and that's why they're good. They're not good in and of themselves. Like they did a poor job of it, but
Mhm.
it's done somehow in some way that it's actually really funny and entertaining. So looking at it in that way, do you think you would have liked it more?
Yeah, I definitely think I would have liked it more being prepared for that. I was just not prepared for a more horror satire, but rather an actual legitimate horror
Right.
film.
Yeah.
So yeah, the I think there was only a little bit of CGI at the end of this story where the main character's her head is on a pike, but she's talking. So it's she's still alive somehow. But other than that, it was really old school special effects. So I really can't criticize that. So really, I'm going through my cons basically
Okay.
because there really wasn't any pros except, like you said, maybe for the comedy of it.
Hmm.
So I guess I'll just keep going into my cons, which is
Yeah, go ahead. It's funny because I have like no cons. I think I have one con for the whole thing, and all of mine are pros. So this actually works out. So yeah, go through all your cons, and then I'll go through all my pros.
okay. The scenes were disjointed to me. This story really picks up right away where she's walking down the street for like 3 seconds, then she's in the expedition funder's office. And I like one of these quotes that I did like that, he had, which was she's asking him to go on this expedition and fund it. And he says, on one condition, two, if I was a younger man. Like, so I don't know, it's just he's a real creep, you know
Yes.
what I mean?
Hmm.
Actually, the quote is one condition. If I was a younger man, there would be two. So that's what he said specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just I don't know. He's a real creepball. So I'm glad that he actually. Well, really, they all got it when you think about it. But his was arguably a really bad way to go.
Hmm.
And did it seem like to you like he was becoming something else when his eyes started to change red?
Yes. Yes, I did.
It's just disjointed and unusual.
Yeah,
um,
look, you're not wrong. Like, I agree with everything you're saying, but because it was so funny to me, that's really what it comes down to. It was so funny and entertaining for me, despite all these, because it was so bad. You know what I mean? So we actually technically agree. I just enjoyed it, and you did
yeah, I
basically,
think you're
because you're not
right.
wrong.
Yeah, I did like when they were getting in the boat and they were like, "You're going the wrong way." Yeah, and they were like arguing and everything. It was just
Yeah,
see, and reflecting back on it, it was actually kind of funny, but it's just not what I had tuned in for. So if you want to go
right.
away, I mean, not go away. If you want to take off with your
Take over.
pros, then yeah, I'll be interested to hear
Okay.
those.
You want me to leave, do you? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I'll start with my favorite lines because I had quite a few. Because it's a shame we couldn't actually watch it together because then it might have been different outcome because maybe you would have seen that it was more funny in the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
I can definitely see if I had taken this very seriously, yeah, it's a very shit. Like all of them were terrible. But if you look at them in a funny way, they're like the most amazing funny thing you've ever seen. So maybe we should watch it again. That way you can like look at it through that lens and see if you enjoy it more. But okay. So my first favorite line was when Angela's like trying to get him to fund it, really. And she's like, do something worthwhile for humanity. And he cuts her off and he's like, worthwhile is for pussies. I thought that was funny. And then my second one is when Angela's shouting, go up river, which is what you were talking about. She's like, go up river, like 8 times. And then the other guy simultaneously is shouting back, turn the boat around, turn the boat around. And oh my gosh, I was dying. That was hilarious because
Yeah.
it was just so long. Okay, then my third one is the man whispering Umbare
Oh,
when he first discovers a bottle shaped hanging sack from a tree.
yeah.
And then when he shoots out the blue goo when he squeezes it, it made me laugh. And then later, it's also funny when he's trying to convey what he found over the walkie-talkie and keeps saying "ambare" and like random stuff. It was just funny to
That
me.
was funny
Uh,
actually.
yeah. And then the fourth, because I have a lot of quotes. My fourth one, and I'm probably alone on this one, but when Angela's like, "They took the boat, they floated away down river." I did not know why that made me laugh so hard, but the floated away part made me die. And I think it's because they stole a boat, so of course they floated away in it.
Yeah.
So I think just the fact that she said that was hilarious. But I do know that the key words are actually downriver because she had been saying go upriver, and that was a big thing they contested basically.
Hmm.
And had been obviously about going up, and so they did point out like one of the guys even said, "See, I told you, blah blah blah." So it made sense, but it just cracked me up for some reason. So okay, so cons for this, I had nothing really. And I actually would have mini cons for the whole thing because the everything that was terrible about it was a pro to me because it was so funny. So let me go into my pros. Okay, so I love that this is supposed to be a horror, right? Because to me it was more like an action adventure treasure hunt in a jungle setting.
Yeah.
I don't know why. You could argue that the ending was kind of horror-ish, but I don't know. I would have categorized it totally different.
I
So
agree.
That was
Yeah, it was
that
more
was just kind of fun.
adventure, mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, and then my second pro, the acting is so
Oh.
bad that's one of the funniest things about it, especially the investor and that other main dude. Like everything they do and say is awful. And so it's just so funny because even lines that wouldn't technically be bad, they make it bad. And then a high point is what you mentioned with the arrow when the investor gets shot in the face
Mm-hmm.
and he has that crazy ass laughing
Yeah.
for way longer than expect as it's being removed. And then his eyes, for whatever reason, yeah, turn like that orangish red
Mm-hmm.
and they don't explain it or anything. And then he just dies. So like I don't even know what the point of that was, but it was funny as hell. So I enjoyed it. I'm glad it was there. Okay, and then in the beginning, when Angela is trying to convince the investor to give her money for her expedition, he berates her for several minutes, and then he suddenly is like, he'll only do it if he gets to go with her, which made no sense to me. That totally came out of nowhere. He basically said no, and then all of a sudden he's like, "My bags are packed, I'm ready to go, and I'm your ride or die." Like out of nowhere, you know what I mean? It made no sense to me. He's just like, "No," and berating her, and then
Yeah.
yes, and I'm coming. I mean, it was out of nowhere, so it was
Yeah, I
funny.
felt the same way. The
Yeah.
acting was just like something you would see like a bunch of people just on the front lawn, someone's pretending like they're hurt. Like that's how bad. Um,
Yeah. Yes, it was. I agree with that. That might be how they found their actors, honestly, but it worked for humor reasons. It's okay. And I still have more pros because I'm a crazy person and I enjoyed it
oh,
way too
okay,
much.
continue.
So, as I mentioned in my favorite quotes, the word ambare is just amazing. Everything about it because it looks funny. It has a funny name, and I enjoyed when they pried it. They pried one of those from that headless man
Mm-hmm.
who was clinching it in the massacred campsite. That made me laugh. And then Angela's flashback of her husband slowly removing his glasses. That was super funny. And I loved that they actually did the same thing. Like they showed it twice when it would have sufficed because it was obviously clear what was going to happen next anyway. But they did it again to show you what you already knew.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? So that was funny. And then I don't know if you remember, but Angela dumping water all over her face to that soft
Uh-huh.
music.
That was a very, like I said, that was due to the disjointment. It was a weird transition.
Yes. And am I wrong? But I think she was alone. So it's not even like she was trying to be sexy for a guy or anything. Like it didn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I think about it, yeah, that even makes less sense than I had
Yeah.
thought.
So that's why it was so funny. Like I was crying in some places from laughter. And then, okay, when Miguel was boxed up in a bamboo death cage, and then someone is beat on the back with a dino-sized death bone all of a sudden, they don't even explain where that bone came from, for one. And it was just so out of nowhere. I was laughing. And then my last one, we finally made it. The ending was really good to me because they just straight get murdered by the tribes and their heads are lined up on the stakes with the other heads that were there when they arrived. So it was almost like a foreshadowing of the ending. I don't know. It was all together. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, it seemed as though some of the tribe men weren't really authentic. They seemed just like people with makeup on. Like they weren't really native from that area.
That's because they were hired from the lawn, remember? No, I'm kidding.
And
But yeah, I
so there was
agree.
that, which really kind of breaks the immersion of the story you're telling. I mean, you need to be at least a little bit authentic in certain areas, or it's going to fall apart and look like a high school production, which is
It
basically what
did.
yeah that came
Yeah.
across as. But in terms of the bone, remember that you said clobbered the person.
Yes.
There that can
Yeah.
be seen really from the very beginning when the investor gets shot because you don't hear any sound effects with the arrow. You just hear him screaming, and like you don't see it. You don't see it come from anywhere. So I would have liked to at least know where it came from. I mean, he's in the middle of the ocean, or not the ocean, but he's in the middle of
Right.
the water, hasn't even stepped off the boat yet, and they nail him. Like I don't know, it's just
That's true. I would argue that that's part of the hilarity, though, is because, like you said, it's so disjointed and out of nowhere, and random shit's happening, and you're just like, "What am I watching right now?" Like, it's a shit show, but done so bad, it's
yeah.
funny.
Well, I completely agree. Um, the next one was called Wet, I believe. An interesting title.
Yes.
I did starting off with my pros. I did like the some of the cinematography of the mermaids and where they were kind of
Mm-hmm.
stalking
Yeah.
Jack. They were stalking him in the middle of the night in his apartment or house or whatever you want to call it. And I like when Jack was speaking with Swan. That whole conversation is really bizarre. because I mean, first of
Yeah.
all, the name Swan is very weird. He was kind of like a cross between David Carradine, yeah, the way he sounded.
Who's that?
Um,
I know the
David
name, but I don't know
Carradine
who.
was in Kill Bill.
Oh, yeah, I
He
agree
has
with
this
that. Yeah, I
very
know who you're
unique
talking about now.
voice, and this guy was kind of like a cross between a pirate and David Carradine. And
You're right. That's
and
hilarious.
he has
Yeah.
this funny quote where Jack is leaving or on his way out, and he just bolts out with "It's the Morai too." Yeah, like, and it was just so bizarre and
Yes.
ill-timed that um that was comical. Like that made me laugh.
See,
So
see, you did think it was
yeah,
funny.
parts, but yeah, like all right, fine, maybe I did.
You need to raise your Colonel rating to 3. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so that was really funny, and once again, it suffered a lot of the things that the first one did in terms of acting and plot.
hmm
So, what did you think?
Wait, did you go through your cons and your pros?
Yeah, I was jumping around. There's really not a lot of praise except I felt like this one had a little bit more of good cinematography, or maybe I just like the topic more. But for whatever reason, it just
Mm.
resonated better with me how it was filmed. But
Oh,
yeah, that was
okay.
really my only pro. None of these were good.
Okay. Until that second viewing, right? Okay. So you're done then on
Yes.
this one? Okay. So it's funny because initially I actually thought it was a silent film because for the first like 5 minutes it's just instrumental and no dialogue. Did you think that too?
I mean, I didn't really feel like that. It was strange, but I felt like it was gonna pick up and become a normal movie.
Oh, okay.
Or yeah,
Yeah. And then the first dialogue was actually that loud toot of a ship that sounded like a dying cow. And then I was laughing so hard. And then the first actual dialogue was when Jack is like, hello, hello. And then he rings the bell on the counter, and then Swan, that guy you were talking about, the creepy shop owner dude, appears out of nowhere behind him with that tiny handheld bell and rings it directly in his ears. And he's like, you in the
yeah,
market
that
for
was
a
funny
bell?
when he's
Yes, I was dying. So like I loved everything up to that point already. It was just super funny and unexpected. And then the second was when he's toasting and he says, "Here's to half of the women everywhere." And Jeff's like, "Why only half?" And then Swan just totally ignores him. I thought that was funny. And then my third one was when Swan says, "It's not what you think. I didn't chop somebody up and bury her in the beach." When Jack hadn't even
yeah.
said anything like that, like close. So I thought that was great. Okay, so those were my favorite quotes. Cons, I have literally no cons. And then into my list of
Oh
pros.
boy,
So, yeah, are you
I
ready? Strap in. Oh, good. Okay. So, I like how Jack tries to sell just the lid of the box to Swan. I thought that was super weird because you'd think he'd sell the whole box. Oh, and then the part that you were talking about, when Swan's acting all crazy about the box, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he shouts, "It's the Morai tomb!" And then strangely invites him for beers after. Like that whole, like it didn't really make any sense. And it was super funny timing, like you said. And then I like that Swan told him mermaids are also ugly and evil, not to revive her, because the only way to get rid of them is to
mm-hmm.
chop them up and bury them and all
Yeah,
that. And he had already found a mummified hand
mm-hmm.
inside one, and yet it didn't even faze him when this guy is telling him this. So right after the conversation, he's off digging for more mermaid limbs,
Yeah.
and then he instantly finds a spine and a head. Like you would think that would give him pause, right?
That's what
Like
the character's
I don't
reactions
know.
didn't make sense, like based on events
Yeah,
unfolding.
I guess I can see like not believing the crazy guy in the shop, but still, I feel like you wouldn't just rush out and immediately do that without some kind of research or I don't know something.
Yeah, it was just very bizarre. It's the Morai too. And he even gets it wrong a second
Yes,
later after hearing it. He's like, the Moray tune? And he's like, no, the Morai tune. Like, so it was just, I don't know, funny.
that's funny. I have more pros because I'm crazy again. So it was funny that the mermaid appeared directly under his
Yeah,
blanket
that was bizarre.
and then almost immediately turns into a demon fish and just straight eats his
Mm-hmm.
dick. I felt like this was actually a better version of that other anthology that we saw,
Oh,
Goblin.
yeah,
Doesn't this more so suit the
I would say so,
Goblin
yeah.
theme? Yeah, it was way more intense and way more unexpected. And then also after Jack was transformed into a merman and he's bleeding out in the
Uh-huh.
tub, and then Swan is like, "Show me," referring to his tail.
Yeah,
Do you
is that
remember
what he
that?
was asking? Like, I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, he's like, "Show me." Like that was so funny because he already knew he was transformed into a merman, and he wanted him to show him his mermaid tail,
Oh.
and he's like bleeding out in the tub. It makes no sense, but that cracked me up so bad. Show me, and then he like lifts up his face. Oh my gosh,
What was
it was
Jack
so funny.
thinking when he's in bed and all of a sudden a woman comes up from the covers? Like, it just didn't make sense, like, his reaction to that.
Yeah, I don't know. My only thing I could think is maybe he did believe Swan and he was really hoping that he was wrong and like he would have sex with a pretty mermaid or something. And so he's like, oh, it's true. Like, I don't know. Because that is strange. Like,
She
I don't, maybe he was still
she
half
did come
asleep.
up and
I don't
like
know.
kiss him, right? A little bit.
Oh, you know what? I think you're right, actually.
So,
Yeah.
but still, just the
I
fact that
think,
you're in like a netting, like to protect you from mosquitoes or something, like, and she's somehow bypasses that and bypasses your covers, like, without you being aware. I mean, it's just between your legs. Like, I don't know, it's
yeah,
just bizarre.
I
You
agree. It
sure you can
was.
buy me a drink
Um,
first? You or something? I don't know.
Okay, then one other thing I just have a note about was I don't know if you remember, but in the beginning, I think it's before there's even any dialogue, and it's still when I thought it was an instrumental. It shows him and he's in the bathtub with wine and his eyes
Mhm.
are shut. So I thought he might have killed himself or something. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Vaguely.
Okay, it was
Oh,
very quick, so you might not remember, but I just remember thinking that's odd because it just showed him in the tub holding wine, like a wine glass, off the edge of the tub and while he
yeah.
was in it and his eyes were shut. So I wasn't sure if he was sleeping or if he was dead. I just thought it was bizarre. Like maybe he killed himself and the next scene he's totally normal. So I didn't get why they included that. But then after seeing the ending, I think it must have been a form of foreshadowing because that's actually where he ends up dying as a merman.
Hmm.
So I thought maybe
That's
that's why they put
interesting.
it in there.
Yeah, that could have been what they're going
Yeah.
for.
So it was just a small thing. Okay, and that's finally the end of my pros on that
Mm.
one.
Well, not much different than the first story, but but very odd and weird. Same tone.
hmm
And then the third with what do you call? There's an actor that looks just like the main character in the third film, but I can't remember his name. Donald Sutherland. No, no,
Oh,
no.
Kiefer
Well, you
Sutherland?
have Keith Sutherland, and then you have his dad, Donald Sutherland. And I think the main character in the third film looks just like Donald Sutherland.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that. I never heard
You
of
can look at him. He
Don
has,
Sutherland. But this one,
what'd you say?
I was just gonna say this one's called
House
House
call,
Call. What
yes.
were you saying?
His beard and, just the shape of his head, everything. Yeah, I was like, is this
What if it is him? Was it close enough to actually maybe
mm,
be him?
probably not? But yeah, so why don't you start this one off and tell me that you loved it?
Okay. Oh, I will. Okay, so my favorite line was when that crazy teapot noise seemed to be coming out of the boy's
Oh,
mouth. And this was obviously they did this intentionally funny. I think it was the only thing in the whole movie that they intentionally made funny. But so the son is tied up and he leans over and it looks like this crazy teapot noise is coming out of his mouth and you're just kind of horrified for a second, like what is happening? And then the mom brings a teapot into frame and she's like, "Oh, thought I'd make us some tea." So it was actually really a legit teapot that was making the noise and not the son at all. I
odd
thought that
timing.
was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this one I do actually have
Oh, wow.
one con. This is my only con for this whole anthology. Yeah, it's just that Jimmy ate a cat. That was non heinous of you, Jimmy. That was really messed up. And I don't think they showed too much, but they showed enough. And I'm
Oh,
obviously not a fan of cats
yeah.
being. So leave the cats alone, and I'll like you. But anyway, okay. So oh, do you want to go into your cons and then I go into my pros, or?
Yeah. I mean, the cons of this was it was just too flimsy of a story, like a house call. And I know they were doing flashbacks for her son about him, how he became what he is. And they
Mm-hmm.
tried to have this twist, in the story with the doctor. I don't know, it just all fell flat for me. And I will say that I didn't
Aw.
really see that twist coming. Did you? Like, did you see that happening?
Hell no, I didn't. And that was part of my enjoyment. Like, I would love to see both of our faces, like a side by side image of my face being like super intensely excited and happy and laughing about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then yours like, disappointed and like, what in
Yeah,
the
see, that
hell am I
was, I don't
watching
know,
face?
it was a good shock, like twist at the end, but for some reason I couldn't appreciate it. Maybe, I don't know, it's just a culmination of all the other factors.
You know, mood has a lot to do with it too. I was in the type of mood where I was open to something like this. If I had been in maybe more depressed or not as great of a mood, maybe I would have taken it more like you did too. So it's not necessarily like, you know what I mean? It kind of depends on how
That's
you are when
true.
you're
I think
viewing something as well.
that's big with a lot of movies, whether it's a comedy or a horror, the frame of mind you're in and who you're with when you're watching it. There's movies that
Hmm.
people really love and then they watch them on their own and they say they didn't laugh at all. Like, it was really what the frame of
Yeah,
mind they were in and who they were with that caused them to enjoy it.
right.
So a lot of Will Ferrell movies, that's what I've heard about his movies. They're like, he's hilarious. Yeah, and then they watch it on their own and they're like, that wasn't funny at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, where were you with your um
Oh, do you want to go? Was that
yeah,
all your cons or?
that was my cons.
Okay. Okay, then I'll go into my pros. So I liked how this one was done because they played up the mystery aspect a lot. Because the first few scenes, the son, Jimmy, is just screaming and asking his mom to untie him. And you quickly learn that he's actually tied
Hmm.
to his own bed. And while she's calling the doctor and asking for help with her son, you only see parts of her face. So you're not actually totally sure what's going on yet. And I thought that was kind of neat. Just because I mean, you assume it's really a mom and like, you know what I mean? But I liked how they did it. I don't know. It made it more mysterious
Yeah.
for what was happening. Then I like when Jimmy escapes the ropes and grabs the doctor's face from
Oh
behind
yeah.
and flips him back. That was hilarious. The way that was, I watched that. I rewound that several times. I think that's why
Oh
I wasn't
really?
done when you were. Because, yeah, I rewound it 3 times, I believe, and kept laughing every time. And then when the mom sees the doctor staking the son in the bed, and she's like, "No!" That was funny. And then my last one, the plot twist, like you were talking about, where the
Hmm.
doctor has that hilarious
Yeah.
vampire transition. He's now going to murder the mom and says, "Thank you so much for calling," with the crazy
Hmm.
vampire eyes and teeth. And it turns out he was the one who started it all. Because I believe he got the
Yeah.
son to turn it
Yeah,
into
he
one
was the
too, is my impression.
mastermind.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was good times. I was pretty excited. And there's a part 2 of Dead Time Stories, which I was thrilled to watch, but it sounds like you
Well,
probably
maybe I'll
don't
give it
want
another
to.
shot, with a different attitude. And sometimes the sequels to movies or anthologies are good. If you look at Creepshow, the original Creepshow 1 and Creepshow 2, I like Creepshow 2 is
Mm.
much better stories than Creepshow 1. So we could be looking at that here in this situation. What I'm
Yeah,
saying
that's
is,
true.
I'm definitely gonna be open to trying that.
Okay, sounds good to me. Also, did you have any pros that you want to
No,
add
I
for this
mean,
one?
I feel like this one was boring. I don't know, it just did not sit well with me. The other two,
Yeah.
I laughed. I did have moments where I laughed, but this one, I know you said you rewound that one scene over and over again, but I
Yes.
didn't really have any moments for me that I thought were funny, just perplexing.
I will give you that about the boringness, though. There were a couple dialogue scenes with the mom and the doctor at the
Yeah.
table that wasn't really necessary. It was a little boring
Hmm.
there, so I
That
agree
makes
with
me more
that,
sensitive
actually.
to boring than other.
No, you're right. I do agree. I just think it, like, the good of it outweighed that, but there definitely
Oh,
was some boring parts in there. I agree with that.
well, we will do part two.
So if you're in for an anthology that you think is funny but awful, this is it. This is the one for you. However, you may not like it, as Jack hated
Yeah.
it. But I think you should give it a shot if it's
Yeah, well, we
free
both
and you got the
are in agreement
time.
on that. I think everyone should give it a shot, even if it means just watching it for the first story or the first half a story and see if you're getting something out of it. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah.
And we will update everyone on part two when we watch that, hopefully with better results. That's a wrap.